Welcome, everybody, to the Tinker Tribe podcast. I'm your host, Greg Dowd, and tonight I am joined by my guest, Francine from Stiletto Farm. She recently gave us a presentation at our local Freedom Cell group, and she has a very compelling story that I'd like to get into more tonight. So, thank you, Francine, for making the time to come on and join me on the podcast. I really think that your story had a big impact on me, really resonated with me, and I'd like to, you know, bring that to the audience. So, how are you?
Fantastic. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here with y'all.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And so, your story is very interesting. So, if you would like to give the audience a little bit of a background on how you made it to where you currently are with a little farm up there with your Stiletto Farm over there in Tennessee.
Well, I'd love to share it with you. I I love this story. It's my journey that got me here. I was raised in Greece until the age of 6, and we moved to California when I was 6 years old. And I spent the majority of my life in California. I've gone back and forth to Greece, but Greece was my foundation as a growing child. And although I lived in Athens, my father was an Air Force officer for the Greek Air Force. Even though I lived in Athens, I'm from the island of Crete. And my father comes from a village in Crete. And so I learned some of the skills that I have and hold dear to my heart today from that foundation. So we would often go to the village, and it was there that I learned to garden with my father. And he also taught me what you would call foraging. We would go into the mountains and the hills in Crete and go pick wild foods, wild herbs, wild medicines, and come home and use them. And that was the start. I've always loved gardening. And so, even in an urban environment, I lived in Bakersfield, California, which is in the Central Valley of California. And I had an average home with what might be called a postage stamp type yard. But being a deep lover of growing my own food and my old fashioned ways, I converted my backyard, even though I had a pool, I converted my backyard and grew enough food to fairly sustain my family and would share with neighbors. And then COVID hit. Um, uh, Let me back up a little bit. I've always carried not only these old fashioned ways, but my grandmother used to say, Francine, it's almost like you grew up in the Depression. And even though I did, I grew up when I came from Crete. This was the land of opportunity. We had everything we possibly needed. But my old fashioned ways growing up in Greece and Europe, especially Greece, I can speak of Crete, we don't waste. Back then and today, we waste virtually nothing. We don't have trash pickup and things like that like we do here. Even modern day Greece, I just returned from Greece. I lived there a year and a half and returned about 4.5 months ago. We don't have trash pickup that goes to your house to get your big barrels of trash.
Oh,
We
really?
No, you have to. I lived in Heraklion, which is the port capital city of Crete. Even there, you have to walk 2, 3 blocks to take your trash. But we very much think that wasting is a sin. So we use almost everything. I hate to say zero waste because that's almost impossible, but minimal waste. Um, so I That foundation came with me here to the US. And so I've always loved to repurpose things. Maybe some might say I was frugal in some ways, and I don't wasting food is something I just can't do. Anyway, COVID hit, and sustainability was really important to me, always has been important to me. And life was becoming unsustainable. Could I really sustain it? Yes, but my quality of life was not sustainable. I was working multiple jobs, working over 40, 60 hours a week, and it just felt like I was in a hamster wheel. And
Yeah.
sustainability, we think about that word, and people think that it just means providing your own food, perhaps growing your own food. But really, to me, sustainability is a broad spectrum of things. It's mental health sustainability, physical sustainability, emotional sustainability, financial sustainability, and of course, sustainability and independence. Independence of any system, independence of anything outside of yourself. And so that's very important to me. Again, I hate to say, but I come from the land of freedom, where it was my great ancestors that created democracy and freedom. And I often share stories of what my people are willing to do for freedom. I come from the island of Crete, and we've had many occupations over history. And during these occupations, there are monuments where during the invasions, I won't say with whom, because that's irrelevant, but during the occupation, the men would go to the local churches and create makeshift bombs, rudimentary bombs, DNA, what is that? Dynamite, basically,
Dynamite.
and put it on themselves and take it with them into these churches. And when the invaders would come into the churches seeking the men of the villages, they would blow themselves up. Meanwhile, on other parts of the village, the mothers and the women and children would go to these cliffs, and the mothers would throw their babies over the cliffs and then jump themselves. Because in my culture, we value freedom over everything, everything.
Yeah.
And that is literally in my DNA. We are willing to die for freedom. We are willing to, I hate to say this, give our children rather than to be enslaved in any form, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, financial. No, we would rather be not be here than to be enslaved. So
Right.
those are people. And that really runs strong in my blood. I respect money. I have a respect for money. Unfortunately, or whatever your view is, we need it in whatever form, whether it be paper money, silver, gold, whatever form, and the modern money like Bitcoin and all that. It's still money. It's still some form of money. I respect it. But what I really value is freedom and time. And that was not sustainable for me in California any longer.
Okay.
So about 4 years ago, I also say I'm gifted problem solver. I see a problem and I don't know what it is about me, but I look at it a little differently and try to solve it somehow. So I saw a desperate need in California. Our grocery store shelves were very sparse, if not empty. And of the food that was available, it was extremely expensive. So families, I know people in my community that were struggling to feed their family with children. And so what I did, it seemed like a logical thing for me, was I ripped up my front lawn. Um, Grass,
Right.
I don't know if you know, but lawn grass takes 5 times more water to grow than it does food. So I ripped it up, started sowing seeds. The backyard was for me. The front yard was for anybody walking by that needed fresh fruit and vegetables.
Wow.
Anyway, during COVID, I also saw some things, some political. I'll just leave it at that. And then I was losing more of my freedom. I was
Right.
losing more of my independence.
Right.
And it was basically being forced upon me. It wasn't a choice. I chose things that were not mainstream. I'm self-employed, and I was afraid to say that I didn't get vaccinated. I've been in homeopathic medicine for 40 years, so I chose not to. And as a business owner, on social media during that time, people were saying, don't go to this restaurant. They were posting things like, don't go to this restaurant. The owners didn't get vaccinated. Don't do business with this person.
Wow.
Oh, very much so. I called it the blacklist on social media.
Wow.
Well, I felt like slowly, like a trash compressor, feeling a sense of compression. Not only that, financially, California is extremely expensive. I
Right.
often give a reference that my average electric bill in California, just electricity, nothing else. Just my average electric bill was 600 to 800 a month. My very last
Wow.
electric bill was 800. I'm sorry, 900 a month.
Oh
I
my
can't
gosh.
sustain that. In order to sustain the cost of living, that would mean I would have to work even more. And I'm far from lazy, but I think 3 jobs is enough. I didn't need another.
My
In
goodness.
order
Yeah,
to
that's like more than my previous mortgage was per
Right,
month. Yeah.
exactly. So, I thought enough is enough, and I basically white flagged, and virtually all my family's in Greece. So I thought, if I'm going to move out of the state that I've spent most of my life from 6 years old until 4 years ago, I'm 57, so it is that. Um, I want to go somewhere where I at least know someone. And my dear friend lives in Dallas, Texas. I didn't want to live in an urban city because
Okay.
history has shown me that people who have access to at least some land
Right.
generally do better. So my father and my aunts grew up during World War II in Greece, and
Okay.
some of our family was in Athens, the Athenian family, versus the people that were my family that was in Crete. They fared much better in Crete. Did they
Okay.
struggle? Absolutely. But they could grow a garden. They could forage. The Athenians in a metropolitan city couldn't do those things. So
Right. Oh,
they had
wow. Okay.
more. So that's something really important that I really hold in my own present day and in my future is I want to be able to have some access to land, because
Right.
if things happen, I have that skill set. I can grow food or I can go forage. Um, so anyway, I tried to move to Greece. I sold my home in 12 hours. It sold, and I tried to move to Dallas
Wow. Wow. It sold that quickly.
very quickly.
Wow. Wow.
I tried to sell my home, purchase a home in Dallas, but I kept losing one bid after another because at that time, a lot of Californians were leaving. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. There was a
for
pretty
the
great
sake, yeah,
migration from
uh,
California.
yes. So I was in competition with a lot of people. So for 2 weeks, I lost one bid after another.
Hmm.
So I literally met with my mother and my sister, and I said, clearly life does not want me in Texas. I'd never been to Tennessee. I never even knew where it really was on the map. Geography isn't my forte. And I never even saw a picture. But I do slightly recall that weeks or so before, I was listening to one of the country radio stations in Bakersfield, and it said something about Nashville, Tennessee, about the artist from Nashville, Tennessee, whoever that was at that time. So I don't know why, other than it was something bigger than me that put the thought, just spontaneous, put the thought that, okay, I'm going to move to Tennessee. Um,
Oh,
I
wow.
don't, I don't believe in failure, and I'm I say I don't have fear, but that's not true. Of course, I have concern and fear, but I do it anyway. So I told my family I'm moving to Tennessee, and of course, they thought I was nuts because I knew nobody, but they're used to that. And I went to Google and I Googled where in Tennessee are most Californians moving to, and it said East Tennessee. So then I thought to myself, okay, well, great. I'll move west then. Um, So I went to Zillow and I put my parameters. Again, sustainability is my motivation. So I left a 4-bedroom home in California and I wanted more land. Being single, I thought I could handle 2 acres
Yeah.
on my own. So I put 2 acres, rural Tennessee, West area, 2-bedroom home because I'd rather have smaller home and more land.
Okay.
Um, because I can't eat a bedroom, but I can grow food in space outside. And
Right.
so a little house popped up, and it's the house that I currently live in. And I bought it sight unseen, and it was one of the best, if not the best decision I ever made. And that's
Wow.
how Stiletto Farms was born.
Wow. Incredible. I mean, you talked a lot about how the culture and things in Greece and in Crete really uh, sticks with you as far as the yearning for freedom. And a lot of people might be hesitant on making a move somewhere. And you were talking a little bit about like it was that yearning for your freedom to go and find something. Like what what is something that people can do to maybe overcome that like fear of, I guess, change or whatever, to figure out a way to make it happen for them, like to
Right.
to make a move on to something new, to find more liberty in their life, to find freedom.
Absolutely. To be honest, it didn't happen overnight. And I had done things in stages but COVID put like a microscope on what was happening. And so I took the big jump then. But I had done some things previously, like started growing food in my backyard rather than having a lawn and all that stuff. And then making lifestyle changes. We think we need a lot when really we need very little. And I have more peace and joy now with less than I did with more. Um, More is just more. um,
Right.
a more house, a bigger home. I wasn't happier with a 4-bedroom house. So that's one way, because freedom isn't just about being enslaved. And slavery comes in many forms. If you have to work 60, 80 hours a week, you have very little freedom.
Right.
If you have debt over your head, you have very little freedom. So there's a lot of things that I did to slowly eliminate my shackles. Debt being one, I would cut back and then started paying off debt. And then I grew some food, so that alleviated some of the cost of purchasing food. Plus, I knew what I was putting in my mouth. I was growing organic food. Um, a lot of little steps. And then, like I said, I'm not afraid of failure, because really we have many role models in all of history that took risks, that took chances. There's a quote I often reflect on, and I can't say it exactly, but paraphrasing Thomas Edison. Someone once asked him, um, you failed so many times on trying to create the light bulb. And he said, no, I didn't. I just learned how not to. It's not a
Yeah.
failure. It's not a failure. And I thought to myself when I made that decision, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen is I can move there. I don't like it. And I learned something and I've grown.
Right.
And courage isn't born, it's created. And that comes from taking the risk, calculated, intelligent risk. And even if you quote unquote fail, you learn from it, and you feel more empowered that you were willing to do such a thing. Um, so I think the thing most important thing is to make baby steps now. Like they say, it can be very overwhelming for a family of four who's fairly comfortable living in their home, and it's their only home they've known and the only state they've known, to contemplate doing something like this.
Right.
To me, I look at the scale, the weight, the benefits, and take the risk of trying something. And really, it's so rewarding. Yes, my house is smaller, but like I said, I have so much freedom. I have more time. I'm self-employed. I don't work 40 hours. I'm almost embarrassed to say that I work an average of 15 hours a week, but that's my income earning um, hours. The rest of the time, I work on my farm, or I go foraging, or I'm evolving things, like building a greenhouse, or building more raised beds, or building a hugoculture area in my plot, or learning a new skill, which in the end, that is income in a different form. But that's more sustainable, because income can come and go. We can all lose our job. Another thing I've done over the years, and I would say that I started this about 10 years ago, is I have multiple streams of income. I have a little part-time job that I contract with here, and then a little one here. And I found it to be very beneficial when the real estate market crashed years ago. And my friends who had PhDs and master's degrees were struggling. I mean, severely struggling, could not buy groceries, could not pay their utilities. But here I am, far less educated. I don't have that kind of a formal education, but they were coming to my house for dinner because I had a garden, and because I didn't lose my one job. I had three little jobs. And so, like the saying goes, don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's one way. People call it now side hustles. Maybe you could do a little side hustle, just in case your area of expertise, your type of job, they're laying off and you can't find another job doing whatever it is. If you're in construction and they've seized construction because of maybe the trade or supply is limited, and just because the company you're working for, you lose that job. But what about all the other construction companies who are in the same place? Then what? Now you're dependent on a system, unemployment or whatever. I never had that because I'm self-employed, but I hear that. So that kind of things are little things that I did long ago to get to where I am today.
We had a little technical issues there, but we're back, and you were explaining how you made the decision to move from California because it was becoming too tyrannical there during the COVID times, and you wanted to find somewhere. Texas wasn't working out. You had heard something about Tennessee, so you're off to Tennessee, and you were explaining a little bit about how that decision can be difficult, but there are no there are no failures of something. There's only learning experiences. So could you kind of get into that a little bit about how, if somebody is kind of approached with the same situation, something that they've been thinking about doing, maybe getting out of a situation that is uh, that they're not wanting to continue on with and find some more freedom in their life, how could they approach that?
So, you know the saying, how do you eat an elephant? It can feel very overwhelming to go from point A to point B. That's a big, giant leap. But like I said, there were small steps, little bites. And so the truth is that you eat an elephant one bite at a time. And so I did small little steps that led to this big step, which made the bigger step easier. Like I said, I started growing things. Independence means it's a broad word. It means a lot of things. So I started growing things in an urban environment. Even if you don't have a backyard, get 5-gallon buckets, grow something. And little by little, you get more and more independence and sustainability. One, you're not dependent on anything else. And two, you're saving money because it's cheaper to grow food. It can be cheaper to grow food than buy food. And, people often say that it's expensive to eat healthy. Yes, it can be, but it's even more expensive to be sick.
Yeah.
It's going to cost you either way. This is going to be a lot of work. You get to choose how hard. What do you want to work hard for?
Choose your hard, right?
Choose your hard, and choose your finances, and choose what you want to spend your money on. And so I started small. I started growing a small garden in an urban environment. Then I expanded the small garden, and then I started reducing my overhead, my debt. That didn't happen overnight. It was little by little. And it started by growing food. Really, that was the first step. And then it led to more and more and more. And then I started buying more uh, recycled or repurposing rather than throwing things away, which I rarely did anyway. But I started repurposing things. And then I started thrift shopping more than buying new. And not only was that sustainable and intelligent for me financially, but it was also for the environment. Um, so I made the big leap, but it was only through the smaller steps that I was able to make the big leap. And I did so. And it was, like I said, one of the best decisions I ever made. And I moved here to Tennessee. And I immediately, before I even unpacked a box of my clothing and belongings, I had raised beds I ordered on Amazon waiting for me here in Tennessee. And I immediately started growing food right away and then developed my farm because I bought, yes, there was the small home, but the 2 acres was the majority. It was woods. So I had it bush hogged, not all of it, but a good acre and a half probably, and then just started experimenting and growing because I've only grown in California pretty much. So I didn't know the climate really and the soil and all that. But again, you just do it. You will learn as you go and learn as you grow. And that's exactly what I did.
That's really good because I think a lot of times what holds us back, I know me personally, is a lot of times we have these I've developed the ideas in my head, but the action to step forward, like you said, to not consider, to consider things as lessons that you're going to learn and not be so afraid to fail.
Right,
Um, that you know you're going to learn a lot by taking action instead of it just being an idea in your head.
right. Like
So
I recently read a book, Atomic Habits, and there's a principle they talk about the 2%.
you're the
And
second person that recommended that book to me.
The 2% it's basically what I said. Because if we look at the big picture, the end of the race, if we're going to sign up to run a marathon, you can't think about running the marathon and just go from no preparation or not taking the steps to get you ready to run the marathon. That's overwhelming. That we actually change the brain. There's science that shows that when we have that type of mindset, we actually change the brain, and it literally makes us freeze and not take the steps necessary. However, and I will share with you this, I used to be very overweight, and when people think I need to lose 50 pounds or I need to lose 100 pounds, that's overwhelming. And all this wisdom isn't just applicable in one avenue or one aspect of life. Really, it's applicable in all of life. So if you look at, oh my God, I need to lose 50 pounds, that's overwhelming. But if you take that principle of 2%, think of, I need to lose 2 pounds. That's attainable. That's sustainable. And then you have this mindset, and you're not changing the actual formation and chemistry of the brain in a negative way to where it makes you mentally and physically and emotionally freeze. And we become like deers in headlights, not taking the steps necessary to get to the end of the marathon, whatever your marathon is. And so I did the little steps, which made the big step. It's like you build momentum. You start slowly building momentum and more courage, and then it catapults you to take the big step.
That really resonates with me because I've been on my own health journey for a while. And yes, it is a daunting task to say, hey, I'm really out of weight. I'm really overweight. I'm really out of shape. And how do I start this? And it's just, it's no magic thing that happens. It's a consistent application of like a discipline, and you just make the commitment to it and you stick to it. And it's those little things that you do every day, but you stay consistent and you stay disciplined with it, that
Exactly.
really make the difference.
And
And it's
really, motivation and discipline, people say often, you're so motivated or you're so disciplined. That is the effect, not the cause. Really, the root is consistency. That's the key word. That's the operative word you said. Whether it's your relationships, whether it's your work, whether it's your health, everything, consistency is key. That's the thing. And like I said, I did like that book, Atomic Habits, because it breaks it down for you about just improving 2%. And then it makes the big elephant attainable, one little bite at a time.
great. So you made it to Tennessee,
I
and
made it. See,
you don't know anybody there. So tell me a little bit about what that was like coming into a community where you're an outsider, basically, and how did you foster relationships with the people that are around you?
thank you for asking that. Again, I'm going to reference my heritage because that plays a big role. And now that I've been here, the South is very much like Greek culture. My mama has often said, Maria, they call me by my middle name, Maria, when are you coming back? And I said, never. They're either going to bury me here in the South or they're going to bury me in Greece. Because I tell my family in Greece that the South is the closest to Greece I have ever found in the US. And I've traveled many places. The Southern hospitality, people being a little bit more open. And I talk about that in a reference of philosophy, and a reference of sustainability, and even in a reference of independence, and in this challenging times where we really need each other. So I moved here, didn't know anyone. And my first funny memory, and it was literally, I got the keys to my home October 1st. October 1st p.m. by that afternoon, I was assembling raised beds in my backyard.
Oh,
And
wow.
the neighbor came to introduce herself. She lives several houses down. She came to introduce herself. And I would like to imitate her sweet Southern accent, but I'm not very good at it. But anyway, she introduced herself. I told her my name, and they already knew everything about me from the realtor, that, oh, she's Greek, she's from California, because it's small town.
Yeah.
I call a village. Anyway, and she said to me something really poignant, and she said, I hate to tell you this, but you can't grow anything during this season here in Tennessee. And I looked at her and I said, I don't mean it disrespectful, but I don't know that, and I'm going to try. And she said, okay. And then I literally, she said, bless your heart. Bless your heart. I learned the meaning of bless your heart.
Yeah, that can have two meanings,
Yes, exactly. And I knew what she meant, like the poor ignorant Greek girl from California who thinks she's going to grow something in the fall and winter in Tennessee. But the
Yeah.
amazing thing was, and this is how the momentum of my community started. She came like about 3-4 weeks later, And the seeds that I sowed were now plants. And she came and she said, what in the world are you growing and how did you do this? And she had never grown from seeds. So I explained that, I started them from seeds with grow lights. And anyway, so that started. She was my first friend that I made here. And I started sharing not only the food, but the skills, because then I started sharing with her, she said, why aren't you killing all these weeds on I'm going to call it my grass, my yard. And I said, are you kidding me? This is food. This is food. This is food. This is medicine. This is, nature's pest control. This is this. And she's like, it was incredible. So I started teaching her and them. But what I was saying is my culture is all about community.
Okay.
And like, again, referencing history, we are a country who has been occupied many times in all of history. And it is only through us sticking together as a community that we survived the occupation of the Venetians, the Turks, you name it. We've been occupied in Greece. It is through community, especially rural. But when I am in Athens, I was just with my aunt, I don't know, 5 months ago in Athens, and I would walk home from church with her. And it's what we would consider an average city block, not very far. The church is like 1, maybe 2 blocks away from her home. On a normal day, it would take us 2 minutes to walk there. However, I call it the 2-hour walk because even Athens, which is a metropolitan city, much like New York, it takes us 2 hours to get home walking. But that's because people see us, the neighbors see us, and they're like, oh, Maria's visiting. They would say, Arati, my aunt, come on in. I just made a cake. Come on, come have coffee with us. It's that. And like I said, in the other aspects of who I am, it's a lot is based on my heritage, but you all have that here too. It just needs a little stirring, maybe.
Right, right.
Yeah, to remember that united we stand, divided we fall. And through community, I share. So I do have a farm. I grow a lot of food. Just last week, I harvested 15 pounds of garlic. Even though I'm a Greek girl who loves garlic, I'm not going to go through that fast enough. But I shared with friends and neighbors. I share eggs. I share whatever I grow that I have an abundance of with my community. And the beautiful thing is now people who are just acquaintances that I've shared that I hear that they need or they like something, I leave it at their doorstep. And the amazing thing is a few days later, I find things on my doorstep. Even food for my pigs, scraps for my pigs, greens for my chickens, whatever. I often find things on my doorstep as well. That's community, sticking together. Tracy we processed my lamb the other day, and we were laughing, and I shared with Tracy that a few houses down, one of the neighbors, a gentleman, called because he heard gunshots. And he called and he said, Francine, are you okay? I want to make sure you're okay because I saw a strange man, which was the gentleman who helped, Logan, who helped me process the lamb. And he saw his car and he saw this man that's never been in my home and then heard gunshots. That's community. That's
Yeah.
watching out for each other. I may have an abundance of tomatoes. Somebody else may have something else. Stick together.
Yeah, that really hit home with me because being in the US, we are so like isolated from each other. A lot of that, like, I was talking to a friend about it recently on our live stream that we do on Sundays, and he told me, when everybody sitting out on their porch and talking to each other stopped? When they had AC. Everybody started being inside, and then, TV and everything keeping you entertained. But back in the day, the way you entertained was by people hanging out, doing stuff outside, and maybe you go and you have some tea with them on the porch to talk about what's going on and what's going on in the community and everything.
Right.
And one of the things that really struck me with what you talked about was like, you if you want to build this, you can't just say, you just can't wait for somebody to come make the first move.
No.
You have to be the initiator, right? Like you have
Exactly.
to initiate something with somebody. It's like that with a lot of, a lot of things in life. Like nobody's going to come and say, "Hey, come work this job or whatever." They're going to come seek you out. You have to go seek the thing you want out, right? So you
Correct.
really have to build that thing that you want.
Right. Isn't it a great philosopher that says, seek and you will find? You do. You have to seek it out. I also believe that in the community, as a nation, as a people, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And we have to help each other, even those less than or who have less than we do. And if even if you have all the tools, all the resources, everything possible, we all need each other, no matter what, whether it's physically or emotionally or mentally. We all need each other. You might have a skill set that I don't have, and vice versa. And if we just join forces, we're much stronger. We're much stronger.
Well, what you're doing, I think, is a really good example, and we can talk to each other till we're blue in the face, but I think it is by showing and being that person that's a light in your community where
Mhm.
people will want to gravitate towards that, because as things may continue to get harder in the world, that if there's an alternative that somebody can see that is working for them, that they're going to be curious and be wanting to possibly emulate what you have going on.
Correct.
And like you said, it really is a division game, right? Like to keep us divided, whereas together we become a lot stronger. And our differences, I think we're all looking for the same things at the end of the day. We want, a good place we want a good place to live. We want to live peacefully. We want to have healthy food. We want to have good water, and we want to have good families. So it's a lot of things that we could find in common, but there really is the division game going on. And I think what I try to get across to my audience is that you might not have that thing around you, but the only way that you can foster that is by doing it yourself. You have to be, even if you're a reluctantly going to go into it, like you said, there are no failures. You're going to learn lessons by being that person in your community to lead something and get something started. Um,
Yes, I agree. And I you said the word common. I am very different in my community. I stand out. Um, One thing that I appreciate too in my culture is to embrace even the uncommon. Just if I see friends or acquaintances that are exactly like me, one that's gonna be a very limited um, way of being, but everyone has value. It makes me grow, because really we are each other's mirror. It makes me grow when I engage with someone very different than me. I have been fortunate to travel, I can't say all over the world, but a big portion of the world over the last 35 years. And one of the things that I treasure most is that I learned other ways. I got to live in environments where it's very different, and it's okay. It's great. You learn more. You grow. I call it sharpening my saw. So a friend might be a new acquaintance, or a new person in my community may be very, very different, but they're my teachers. Everyone's my teacher. I learn from them. And we all have something to contribute to the community, even if it's different.
Yes. So, that's something that I struggle with is like opening, maybe opening the door to some people, but um, that that you're right. We're all human beings. We're
Yeah.
all messy. We're carrying some stuff from our past that is maybe kind of messing with us in the moment, and that we have to figure out ways that we can find commonality, because it really is a game of where we can choose to go down a different road as as humans. So, in building the future that we want to see, the only way to do that is by taking actions. It can't just be in our heads and just keeping it there. It has to be some actions to take, and to move in the right direction. One of the guys that I like to follow, he talks about having like a 7 generational way of thinking,
Mm.
to where we may, this may even come from a Greek philosopher, but I believe there was a quote that talked about planting the seeds whose shade we may never grow under.
Exactly.
I believe maybe might have been Aristotle. I don't know, but but so you have this farm. How many different you growing animals, raising
Yes.
animals on the farm?
So my farm is a permaculture regenerative farm, and I did that for many reasons. One, because that's really the old ways. We have new words now for things that my great grandparents did that they didn't have words for. It was just normal. Like we call it foraging. Well, we don't have a word for it. You just go do it. We call it permaculture and regenerative. Well, that's how my great grandparents grew and my grandparents grew in Crete. So it is regenerative permaculture. I have never, even though I learned how to garden as a child, limited, I studied permaculture and regenerative farming and some of the practices like biochar and bokashi and really sustainable methods of feeding the soil, not the plant. But I never raised animals. I never did. I was a vegetarian for 51 years, and it was only recently that I started eating meat. And that's a long story. Otherwise, I'd love to share it with you. But I never grew up raising animals. But that is something I learned. And again, that not fearing failure and starting off small. I wanted all the animals. I wanted a menagerie, but that's not practical. That's not sustainable. That becomes overwhelming. That's the elephant, even though my heart wanted that, but that's the elephant. So I started small. I started with chickens, laying hens.
Yeah.
And I succeeded. Nobody died. I got eggs. They were healthy. I used homeopathic methods in raising them. They've never been vaccinated. They don't take antibiotics. Instead, I use essential oils, apple cider vinegar. I ferment their feed. I use what nature has. I use what's available to me. Here in Tennessee and in the South, we have lots of wood. We have lots of pine and needles. We have lots of leaves. We have a lot of abundance. We are very blessed, honestly, to have a lot of abundance that nature is providing us. So this type of farming that I do, it's sustainable. I hardly have any outside expenses or outside dependency. My fertilizer, I make my own. My compost, I make my own. I use all these methods. So if anything becomes scarce or expensive, it's okay. I make my own. So I started with chickens. I succeeded. So then I thought, okay, now I'm eating meat. Why don't I get meat birds? I've never raised meat birds. They're different than laying chickens, hens. So let me try. Well, I did my first batch. They were beyond healthy. We processed them. I only started with 5. Again, take your small bites. I started with 5. We ended up processing with a group of friends 35 chickens. Mine were the biggest. And again, they don't have hormones. They didn't have steroids. They didn't have any of that, but they were huge. They almost looked like turkeys compared to my friends, their chickens.
Wow.
So I succeeded, and we processed my 5. So as I was raising them, I thought, okay, how about pigs? So I got 2 small pigs. Now they're huge. They're like 200 pounds. They're super healthy. They too are raised in homeopathic methods, and eat non-GMO, fermented feed and food scraps. Or today we harvested cabbage from my farm and some onions and a few things, and they got the outside layers. So nothing, I can't say words that are extreme like nothing or zero waste, because that's not true. Very, very limited waste on my farm. So I now have successfully raised pigs, and then I raised a lamb that we just processed. So I have hens, I have meat birds again, and I have 2 pigs, hogs, and I had up until a few days ago 1 lamb, and I have a turkey, Mr. Thanksgiving.
Wow. So how do you keep yourself organized and able to take care of all these animals? And how do you have it set up to where you're able to keep the whole farm running with taking care of all the animals? Do you have like a system? Do you have like you have to keep things on a schedule? And how do you stay organized so that you can be able to handle all that?
Well, again, looking at today's outcome is a result of what I did 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I couldn't be here today if it weren't for the steps that I took 10 years ago. So the fact that I only work 15 hours on a paid job allows me more time. But even within that, I do have a routine. It's not rigid, but I do have a routine. I ferment my animals' feed. All the animals, their feed is fermented. Why do I ferment? One, because animals' health is very similar to our health. A lot of 78% of our immune system is in our gut. And fermented foods, probiotics, actually take care of our gut. The same with the animals. But the other great thing is that fermenting their feed is financially sustainable. So I'll get a 50-pound bag of organic chicken feed. If I did traditional feeding, I would go through that, let's just say for the sake of easiness, maybe 2 weeks.
Okay.
Whereas now when I'm fermenting, that goes a month. I've doubled my
Really?
volume. Yes, because what it does is it not only ferments, but it expands. The feed becomes 1 giant scoop of feed becomes the volume of 2 once it's fermented.
Ah,
So they get fuller, but then they're also getting the nutrition of the probiotics that was not present before I fermented, but now it is. Um,
I see.
so what I do is 4 days. Every 4 days, I create the food, 4 days worth of food in buckets. And I ferment the chicken's feed, the hog's feed, the turkey's feed, the meat bird's feed. All of it's fermented, and I have 4 days worth. The tough day is the 4th day or the 5th day. That's the day I start all over. That's the one I spend more time. But I like to streamline things and make it doable little by little every day. Otherwise, it is overwhelming. And
Right.
I let go. I have a respect or an acknowledgement that this is my busy season. This is where I'm harvesting and processing food. So for instance, like the other day, I harvested 15 pounds of garlic plus other things. Well, then I have to cure the garlic, and then I braid the garlic and preserve it in the curing process. That all takes time. Um, so having somewhat of a streamlined system and doing a little bit every day makes it attainable. And is there things that I give up? Yes, during a busy season, I may not go on vacation. I may have to wait until fall or winter because this is the season of growing, of harvesting, and storing food. Whether I can dehydrate, freeze, it doesn't matter, but I don't let things go to waste. If I'm not eating it, if my friends aren't eating it, my community's not eating it, my animals are eating it. And preserving, I always preserve food for the future.
So what's your go-to preservation method? Is it more of the canning or freezing, dehydrating?
It's a little bit of all, depending on the food itself. So right now I have tomatoes and eggplant and zucchini squash. So I like to take those and I cook them down almost as if I'm going to make a future pasta sauce or a frittata or whatever I may use. And I make a base. And then I freeze those in individual ready-made so that in 2 months from now, 6 months from now, next year, if I'm in a hurry or it's next harvest season and I'm busy, I've got a bunch saved. Or if anything happens, God forbid, things continue the way they are. Our grandmothers did this not because they were facing the challenges we are facing globally. They did it because I might get sick and not be able to garden as much, or my partner might lose their job, or they may cut my hours at work, or our bills might go up for whatever reason. It's very much intelligent, sustainable living. It really is. It doesn't have to be, political unrest all over the world. I hope it's not that, but it doesn't have to be. It could be something as simple if you break it down as you might get a really bad flu that will knock you out for a few weeks, or your hours may get cut at work.
Yeah, and I think that is a big thing when people think about traditional farming as it's done now, where it's this huge industrialized scale, and you have to have all this capital, and you constantly have to create these inputs. The regenerative aspect, right, is about making it economically sustainable as well, and you touched on that with the fermentation of your feed and all those things. So have you seen, like, I know I get into some discussions about the homestead, living that kind of lifestyle, it can become a money sink if you're not like thinking about some of these things.
Sure.
But it really can be economical if you are implementing, certain things.
Sure. If you were at my farm today, you would see some things, but if I may say this, in anything we do, if I decide I like video games all of a sudden, I'm going to have to spend money on a console and games and things like that. It's what's important to you. What do you value? And what's your projection for your future? Yes, there is some initial cost, but there are many ways to minimize those costs. Permaculture regenerative is about repurposing and reusing. If you go to my farm today, you're going to see that a few months ago, I had this laundry rack that somebody bought me, or I bought me, and it goes between your washer and your dryer. It's very narrow, and it's about 4 inches deep, 4 shelves. I don't need it anymore, so I took it out. Most people would just throw it away. It's just plastic. Throw it away.
Right.
Number one, I do not like to throw anything away. Well, again, I'm a problem solver. I saw it. Yes, I would like to throw it away, but I won't do that. I could give it away, but then it came upon me that, Francine, this is a planter. Repurpose it. It's a planter. So it now has 4 jalapeno plants on the top tier. It has radishes on 3 tiers, and it has greens on the bottom tier. And now it's a planter.
Yeah.
What did that cost me? It's something I had. A lot of things, like I talk about buckets. There's so many buckets on my farm. I have space, but I also teach that you could have a tiny balcony in New York City as long as you have a bucket, a space for a bucket, you can grow something. Um, I use the buckets because a lot of these buckets were food distribution buckets that people sell for pennies on the dollar, really. And rather than have them go in a landfill, they're now a planter, or they're now a place where I do bokashi composting, or they're where I make my own fertilizer using what nature has given me. So I collect greens, wild greens, or we cut I'm going to loosely call it my lawn because it's a mixture of a lot of things. It has wild things like plantains. It has a lot of local plants that you would consider weeds. Well, to me, they're food and medicine. So I use them, I clip them, add a little bit of chicken poop, fill the bucket with water. I've got one of the best fertilizers you could buy, but you're not
Hmm.
buying. You're
Right.
using what's available. So yes, there is some initial costs, but there are also ways to not have so much of initial cost. Somebody asked me, I started with my chickens, but I never raised chickens, so I bought grown chickens. I did the
Yeah.
easy because I needed to give myself a little bit of grace and a learning curve. I've never
Right.
raised chickens, so I didn't want to raise from the eggs,
Chicks.
even tiny chicks. So I thought, well, let me start with the adult chickens and learn my way. So only this year did I start raising baby chicks. And someone said, oh, do you have a this and a that and the this and that equipment? I have nothing. All I had was a grow lamp, a heat lamp, and a big tub, or what do you call them? Yeah, like a tub that you get at Home Depot. I did that. I put pine needles, free pine needles, put the heat lamp, which I don't know what that was, like $15, $20, and that's it. We don't
Yeah.
have to have all that stuff. Our great grandparents didn't have all these things. Are they useful? Do they make it a little convenient? Yes, but you don't have to have that. I raised my whole new flock in a tote, a big plastic tote with free pine needles and a $20 heat lamp. And
Yeah.
now they're healthy and thriving, and now they're starting to lay eggs.
Yeah. If there's a will, there's a way, and a lot of times it's when you so I recently listened to a podcast where they were talking about how the creativity aspect can come from a basically like kind of a lack of resources.
Exactly.
And when you get creative, that's part of the critical thinking process, and you're like lighting up kind of new areas of your mind, being able to solve problems with by being creative about things.
Need
And
is a great motivator. Need is a great motivator, and it's thinking outside the box. Get creative. Look what you have around you. Don't overthink, and don't be, I don't want to say manipulated, but don't be influenced to think that you have to have all these expensive things to grow your own food and to create a sustainable life. You don't. It's actually the opposite.
yeah, well, buying the latest whatever gadget and gizmo thing looks like it may solve all your problems. You're right. There's probably a creative solution in there that you can come up with things that you already have laying around.
Yes, exactly. And I often look at nature as an inspiration, and permaculture is the different people often ask me, what's the difference between an organic grower and a permaculture grower? Um, organic is organic, and that's a whole different topic. But permaculture isn't just a lack of using harmful chemicals, for example. It's not just that. It's actually very witness type of growing. You are a witness. You are looking at nature and seeing and learning from nature. So an example that I often talk about is when I moved here and I started this garden area, I had an infestation of potato bugs, or roly-polies, some people call them. Okay, an organic farmer might use a mixture, a little bit of toxic chemicals, but then more natural chemicals, and that's a band-aid, not a solution. Does it solve the problem? I don't know if I should use the word solve. It temporarily is a band-aid. A conventional farmer will just spray the heck out of it with toxic chemicals. Again, does it solve the problem? A permaculture, someone who grows in a method of permaculture, thinks beyond the band-aid. Yes, we need the band-aid. We're cut. There's a problem. Let's clean it up, get the band-aid, but now let's fix the wound. The wound is deeper than the surface. It's like an iceberg. So you step back and you look at what you're growing, you look at the soil conditions, you look at the environment, and you say, I said to myself, okay, temporary solution. Get my chickens, let them eat the potato bugs. That's a win-win. I give them less feed. They increase their protein intake. I get to eat that yummy protein in their eggs. Great. But that is a band-aid. Now let's see. Let's go deeper underneath the surface. What is the problem here? There's an imbalance. There's nothing attracting the predator bug of the roly-poly or the potato bug. It obviously does not have a predator in this area, where, or certainly not enough of them. So do your homework. What's a predator of a roly-poly or a potato bug? Find that out. Okay, what do they eat? So in permaculture, now we start planting some of those plants that the predator eats in that area, so that we bring back balance in the system. And that's for the future. Remember, kind of like with our philosophy of sustainability, it's not one big thing. It's a lot of little things, steps that lead you in that direction, not just for today, but for the future, because sustainability isn't about just right now. You're building a bridge for the future, for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It really, like, looking at how everything is working in nature, and how being that observer of, being able to step back and look how all these things are operating, is really giving you, like, the basically, the majesty of it all in, our modern day lives. Is we are really separated from that. So, getting to be out in nature really you're able to see how all these things are working in a synergy with each other. And, solving problems in that regard by working with nature, and instead of trying to, force your will upon it, I guess. So you have a unique name for your farm, Stiletto Farm. Can you tell us where that comes from?
Goodness. So I will tell you that I live the majority of my life, if I'm not wearing overalls on my farm, working my farm, I'm wearing yoga clothes because I'm a yoga physiotherapist. And if I'm not wearing those, the European in me loves fashion. So then I dress in dresses and stiletto heels. And people have commented here because, of course, it's very different. I go to Walmart in stiletto heels. Today, we ran errands, and we were running errands, and I had red stiletto heels while we were running errands today. But I have to tell you, we made a pit stop. We veered off, and we went for a drive, and we were in the Waterloo, Alabama area, rural. And I told Tracy, I said, stop, I see mushrooms. And so I was prepared. I was so prepared to take off. I took off my stiletto heels, and I was starting to go out barefoot. I don't care. I'll go climb in the mountains barefoot if I have to. And I will to go get mushrooms or anything. Um, and then Tracy's yelling out the door, "No, your boots are in the back." And so my boots and I have a dress on, a skirt on, and I'm climbing the side of a hill up, straight up, climbing, holding onto branches so I don't slide down. It's muddy, but I don't care. But because I found over 2 pounds of golden chanterelle mushrooms, which I Google searched is about a $75 fair market value right now. And nature just gave it to me.
Yeah. I mean, how did you spot that while you were driving down the road? You just kind of
Yeah, I
popped
know it
out
to
at you.
be, yeah, we were rural and I see the things. I'm very grateful to have been taught those things. Now, mushrooms I didn't learn. I self-taught and read a lot, and I take precautions. I only pick what I absolutely 100% know without a doubt. And the ones I'm most comfortable with are oyster mushrooms, chanterelles, morels, and lion's mane. Those for sure, I can practically identify them very easily, very easily for me. I take some, there's others that I'm like, but then I study more to make sure, because that's something you don't want to take a chance with.
Right. So Francine, I mean, you have all this knowledge that you've accumulated, and I think there is a real hunger for the knowledge of some of these things in the world. Like, do you have any plans on maybe sharing that or becoming some kind of way to that you can share that knowledge?
I'm glad you asked that. Actually, yes, I honestly believe that I was born to be a teacher. And yes, I am a teacher. In one way, I've taught English as a second language to students, foreign exchange students. I've taught many things. And as a yoga physiotherapist, yoga teacher, I teach. But I live a very transparent life. And to me, having a skill or knowledge and not sharing it is like having the cure to cancer and keeping it to yourself. And so I feel it's very important to share. A lot of young people don't know these skills. A lot of my peers don't know these skills.
Yeah.
I was just fortunate to come from an old country where I was taught old ways. And then I took, it was like a race, and the baton was handed to me. I took the baton and I studied more and learned more on my own. Um, I have to confess that I was, like I said, I lived a year and a half in Greece, and I just returned about 4.5 months ago. The truth is I came home to get my home ready to sell it and move permanently back to Greece because I have dual citizenship. But
Yeah.
God in life had a different plan for me. I came home and I did the things that I needed to do, started preparing my house to sell. And then I was approached through a friend of a friend who I'd never met, approached me, heard my story, heard some of the things that I'm doing, wanted to come see the farm, came and asked if I would be interested to start doing shows for PBS. So I've got my training wheels on because I believe we only have one chance at a first impression. And rather than, that's the elephant. Having your own show is an elephant. That's overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
However, if I do small steps, which I have been, we've been doing, they did a farm tour and a group did tours. And then I started teaching that way. And then we started filming short, let's call them reels, and then short lessons, and then they've published them. Now I'm getting, again, it's that one bite at a time because that big project is overwhelming. It's still overwhelming.
Yeah.
However, that's the end, the finish line, or the beginning of a finish line. So I am doing some stuff for PBS now. PBS Nashville was just at my farm yesterday, and national PBS is going to do a segment or filmed a segment about my farm and the methods that I'm doing and some of my philosophy and sustainability and skills. Um, I one of my they say it's important to know your strengths, but it's more important to know your weaknesses. And my weakness is technology. I can spend all day outside and do simple rudimentary things, but technology is very much a challenge for me.
Yeah.
Maybe my age, my generation, and then it's just something I'm not passionate about. Um, so I'm a freelance writer. I currently publish not about gardening or farming, but it's editorial writing, and it's published in Tennessee, my writing in a newspaper in Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama currently. But I want to start creating more content. I'm practicing on my social media, and because I live very transparent, I share the good, the bad, and the ugly, my successes and my quote unquote failures, or what I call lessons. Um, and I want to have my own show. That's the goal, and I'm working towards that. I also want to have a YouTube channel, which we're debating right now whether to do it on my own now or wait and do it through PBS, because they do it with you, for you. And then I would like to do what you're doing, my dear, and have a podcast as well.
Oh, wow. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. It's, just like you said, it's baby steps, like
Absolutely.
that's how it started for me. Was started with an audio thing, and then figuring out the tools and everything, and just slowly working at it. But that's really exciting. So what is the show on PBS going to be called?
I don't have the exact name yet, but what I'm doing right now is basically a lot of gardening things, teaching a
Mhm.
lot of gardening things, and I've shared a lot of those on social media, and PBS has shared it on their social media and their formats. But as for me, I only share on Facebook, really, and social media that way for now. But my intention will be about things that I know. I cannot teach what I do not live. And so it's everything: lifestyle, sustainability, gardening, cooking. I am a personal chef. I love to cook. Minimal waste, all of those things, cover all those aspects. And a little bit philosophy, because I am Greek.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the I think Plato's Republic was one of the things that I've looked into,
Yes.
as far as some of that goes. But excellent, Francine. Really appreciate you coming on to share your story. What a compelling story of being able to have the courage to go and leave a place that you had been for so long and start something new, and something that you can build into the future. um, where can people follow what you have going on right now and learn more
Sure.
about what you have going on? And if they want to support you in any way, where can people find all that stuff?
Okay, well, first, I invite anyone to come to my farm. I'm very open. I'm in Counts, Tennessee, Stiletto Farm. My name is Francine Papadimitrakis, and you can find me on Facebook. I don't. It's really there that I do most of my social media. One, because it takes a lot of time away from what I'm doing to have many platforms. So for now, this is the main way and how I communicate and share. I also make videos, my own content, and share them on social media. Like I explained how I use wood ash on my farm, whether it's to help with pest control for my chickens so that the chickens can bathe in it. And it helps reduce mites. Um, and how I use wood ash in my garden and the benefits of doing that nutritionally and pest control as well. And then how I make biochar. So all these things, I do videos and share them with people so that they can be empowered, because it's important to share knowledge.
I can agree more. That is, what it's all about on this channel, and trying to give people some tools so that they can empower themselves. So, um, and if you need any help figuring out any of the stuff on setting up more of the tech side of things, I'd love to help. So,
Oh
um,
my goodness, watch what you offer, because I'm going to call you.
yeah,
Because I do need help with that. And I have a deep yearning, and I hear, if I jokingly say, if I had $1 for every time I have someone say, Francine, you need a podcast. Francine, you need a YouTube channel. Francine, you need to write a book. Francine, you need your own show. I I would have many farms, but one thing at a time, and I'm getting there. Clearly, God, divine universe has started that for me now, moving in that direction. So thank you so much, not only for your offer, very generous offer, but for allowing me to share today and for inviting me to your podcast.
well, thank you so much, Francine. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today, and we'll have this out to the folks by the end of the week. And once again, thank you so much. And guys, if you like this, if you think that it could be of value to somebody, please like and share the video, and subscribe to the channel. Working on getting more guests in, and we can talk. I've got some good guests lined up as well for talking about more solutions. So like, subscribe, and share the video if you got value out of this, and go follow Francine. I'll make sure to have all of her information in the video description. So thank you.
Thank you.